the spaceship landed silently on the dusty surface of the alien planet. The sky above was a dull shade of violet, casting an eerie glow over the landscape. Lieutenant Ethan, a young soldier from Earth, stepped off the ship, his boots crunching against the alien soil. He adjusted his military gear, checking his weapon one last time. His mission was clear: to secure the landing zone and make contact with the alien forces. But what he didn't expect was what lay ahead. In the distance, a large palace-like structure stood, towering above the barren land. It looked like something out of a nightmare, with dark spires reaching into the sky, almost as if they were daring anyone to come near. Ethan felt a shiver run down his spine as he began to walk towards it. He knew this place wasn't just any ordinary alien base, it was the stronghold of the alien queen. The reports from Earth had warned of her power, but no one had truly described the fear she invoked. The queen was said to be ruthless, cold, and incredibly powerful. She was the leader of a fierce alien army, and her arrogance was as famous as her strength. But Ethan wasn't here to be intimidated. He was a soldier, and soldiers didn't back down from challenges. As he approached the massive palace doors, they slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, the air was cold and heavy, filled with the scent of metal and ozone. Ethan's heart raced, but he kept his face calm, focused on the mission at hand. The walls were lined with futuristic technology, blinking lights and screens, but there was no sign of movement. He cautiously stepped further into the dark hall. Then, he heard it. A soft chuckle. It wasn't loud, but it echoed through the halls, sending a ripple of tension through his body. Ethan stopped in his tracks, scanning the room. And then, he saw her. The alien queen stood at the far end of the hall, framed by a large, glowing portal. She was tall, taller than any human woman, with smooth blue skin that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. Her hair was long and platinum blonde, falling in waves down her back. The crown she wore was magnificent, gold and silver twisted into an elegant design, almost like it had been forged in a star's core. Her eyes locked onto Ethan's, cold and calculating. She smiled, a smile that made Ethan's blood run cold. There was no warmth in her expression, only disdain. "Another human," she said in a voice that echoed off the walls, soft but carrying power. "You think you can walk into my domain and make demands? How amusing." Ethan stood tall, trying to keep his composure. He knew the stories about her, how she mocked her enemies before crushing them underfoot. He wasn't about to show fear, not now. "I'm here on official business," Ethan replied, his voice steady. "I need to speak with you." The queen tilted her head, clearly amused. She took a slow step forward, her movement fluid and graceful, like a predator circling its prey. "You're bold, human," she said, her voice dripping with mockery. "Do you honestly believe you can speak to me as if we are equals? You are nothing compared to me." Ethan's jaw tightened. He had been briefed about her arrogance, but hearing it firsthand was something else entirely. He didn't flinch, though. His mission was more important than her words. "I'm here to make sure this planet doesn't become a threat to Earth," he said. "I don't want to fight, but I will if I have to." The queen's laugh echoed through the hall. It was a soft, melodic sound, but it was filled with such cruelty that it sent a chill through Ethan's spine. "Oh, how brave," she said. "You think you can threaten me? A mere soldier, standing before a queen. How quaint." Ethan's fingers tightened around the grip of his weapon, but he didn't draw it. He had to keep his calm, keep his focus. He had been trained for moments like this, when the enemy tried to break your spirit with words. "I'm not threatening you," Ethan said, trying to keep his voice level. "I'm offering you a chance to stand down. For the sake of both our people." The queen stepped closer now, the air between them thick with tension. Her eyes never left his. "You offer peace, human? You are funny. Your kind comes to our planets, destroys our lands, takes what they want, and you ask for peace." Ethan didn't respond immediately. The queen's words were harsh, but they weren't untrue. He had seen the destruction humans had caused on other planets, the way their greed had torn apart civilizations. but that didn't mean he was going to let her destroy Earth. "I'm not here to defend everything humans have done," he said. "But we can make this work. We don't need to fight." For a moment, the Queen was silent. She studied him, her expression unreadable. Then, without warning, she flicked her wrist, and a sharp, blinding light filled the room. Ethan instinctively raised his arm to shield his eyes. When the light faded, the Queen was standing inches from him, her eyes locked on his with a burning intensity. "I don't need your pity," she said softly. "But you will bow before me." With those words, the Queen's soldiers appeared from the shadows, surrounding Ethan in an instant. They were silent, towering figures in dark armor. The room felt suddenly smaller, more claustrophobic. Ethan's heart pounded, but he didn't show fear. This was just the beginning. He knew he had to find a way to turn the tide, but how? Hook, the Queen had dismissed him, but the real battle was just about to begin. Would Ethan survive this encounter, or would he fall victim to the Queen's deadly game? The tension in the air was thick. Ethan stood in the middle of the vast hall, surrounded by the Queen's soldiers. His mind raced, trying to calculate his next move. His hands itched to reach for his weapon, but the Queen's cold eyes warned him that any rash movement would end badly. She had already shown him her power. Her confidence was unmatched, and she wasn't going to let him leave unscathed. With a slow, deliberate motion, the Queen stepped forward, her heels clicking against the metal floor. She was closer now, her presence overwhelming. Ethan could feel the weight of her gaze on him, as though she was studying his every move. His heart pounded in his chest, but he didn't let it show. "You think you can threaten me, human?" the Queen asked, her voice soft but laced with venom. "Do you really believe you can intimidate me with your weapons and your empty words?" Ethan didn't respond immediately. He knew better than to argue with her. The Queen wasn't like any enemy he had faced before. She was calculating, and every word she spoke seemed to carry a hidden meaning. Her arrogance was powerful, but beneath it, there was something more, a sense of superiority that seemed unshakable. "You misunderstand," Ethan finally said, his voice steady. "I'm not here to threaten you. I'm here to offer a solution. We don't need to fight. But if you push me into a corner, I'll have no choice." The Queen raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. She tilted her head slightly, as if studying him like an insect under a magnifying glass. "Offer me a solution," she repeated, her voice a mocking whisper. "You think that I would listen to a weak human like you?" The soldiers around them remained motionless, their eyes hidden behind dark visors. It was clear they were under strict orders to remain silent, to watch and wait. The Queen's amusement was evident, but Ethan could feel the challenge in the air. This was more than just a battle of strength. It was a battle of wits. "Strength isn't the only power," Ethan said, keeping his eyes on her. "You can be powerful all you want, but that doesn't mean you're invincible. We can work together, find common ground. You can stop this war before it even starts." The Queen let out a soft laugh, and for a moment, Ethan's heart sank. He could feel her mocking him, belittling his words. But then, something shifted in her expression. It was fleeting, but Ethan caught it, a flicker of something other than arrogance. Was it doubt? "You really believe that, don't you?" she said, taking another step closer, her armor glinting in the low light. "You think I will listen to you, a mere soldier, and just stop everything? You know nothing of power." Ethan didn't back down. "I know enough. More than you think." There was a long pause. The Queen's smile faded slightly, but her eye still held that dangerous gleam. She was testing him, seeing how far she could push before he snapped. Ethan knew that any wrong move could be his last. He couldn't afford to show weakness now. "You know nothing of this world," the Queen said slowly, her voice gaining an edge. "You think because you're human, you're some sort of hero. You think because you carry a weapon, you are strong. But let me tell you something, Ethan. Strength means nothing here. The only thing that matters is domination. I do not need to negotiate. I do not need to compromise." The word stung, but Ethan refused to flinch. He had seen enough of this type of arrogance in his years of service. It was always the same. The powerful believed they were untouchable until they were finally confronted with their own weakness. "You might be powerful," Ethan said, his tone more forceful, "but I'm not backing down. I fought through worse than this." The Queen stopped in front of him now, so close he could feel the heat radiating off her. Her gaze locked onto his, unwavering. There was a silence between them, thick with tension. Then, in an instant, the Queen raised her hand, and a powerful shockwave sent Ethan stumbling back. The air crackled with energy as her armor hummed, charged with an unseen force. She had shown him a glimpse of her true power. "You think you can fight me? You think you can win this war?" The Queen's voice was now colder, more calculated. "Let me make one thing clear, you will never defeat me. You will never be strong enough to stand against me." Ethan staggered but stood tall, wiping the blood from his lip. His heart raced, but his eyes never left her. He hadn't been prepared for the shockwave, but he wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing him break. "Maybe not," he said, his voice gruff. "But I'll never stop trying. And if I'm lucky, I'll find a way to beat you at your own game." The Queen's smile returned, this time more genuine. She wasn't laughing at him now, she was studying him, intrigued by his resilience. "Interesting," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Very well, human. Show me what you're made of. Prove to me you're not as weak as I think you are." Ethan didn't hesitate. He knew the real fight was just beginning. This battle wouldn't be won by strength alone. It would be a battle of wit, willpower, and strategy. And Ethan wasn't about to lose. Hook, the Queen had underestimated him, but now, the real challenge was about to begin. Would Ethan outsmart her, or would he become just another fallen soldier in her conquest? The tension between Ethan and the alien Queen was palpable, thick enough to cut through with a knife. After their brief confrontation in the throne room, Ethan found himself unsure of how much longer he could keep his composure. The Queen's words had been sharp, her power undeniable. But her arrogance had given him an opening, a crack in her seemingly perfect armor. He had to exploit it. The Queen stood at the center of the room, her expression unreadable, watching him with a quiet, almost amused gaze. Ethan could sense that she was toying with him, testing him like one might test a new, unbroken piece of technology. But what she didn't know was that he had something far more valuable than strength or weaponry, his mind. And it was the one thing she hadn't accounted for. "You think I'm afraid of you, don't you?" Ethan asked, keeping his voice steady. "I'm not. And I won't back down." Her lips curled into a smirk, and for a moment, Ethan saw something flicker behind her eyes. It was brief, but it was there, something that wasn't arrogance. A crack in her confidence. "You should be," she said softly. "You are in my domain, human. You are nothing but a speck in the vastness of my empire." Ethan stood tall, but his eyes didn't waver. He could feel the weight of her words, the heavy pressure she tried to place on him. But he had faced pressure before. He knew that the key to victory wasn't in brute strength or threats, it was in finding the right moment to strike. For a brief second, his thoughts wandered to his crew back on the ship. What would they think of him now? Would they be proud of him, or would they think him foolish for trying to negotiate with the enemy instead of fighting back? His loyalty to Earth was unquestionable, but at that moment, his focus was entirely on the Queen. This battle was about more than just survival, it was about proving that he could stand against the most powerful being he'd ever faced. The Queen's eyes narrowed, and she stepped closer, her steps purposeful. As she approached him, the room seemed to grow colder. Her presence was like a storm, threatening to swallow him whole. But Ethan stood firm, his heart beating in his chest like a drum. "You're bold, human," she said. "I'll give you that. But that will be your downfall. You cannot win here. You cannot outwit me. I am the ruler of this world, and no one can defy me." Ethan felt the sting of her words, but he pushed it aside. He was prepared for this. If there was one thing he had learned from his training, it was that the key to defeating an enemy like this was not physical force, but mental endurance. "I don't need to outwit you," he said, his voice calm, almost mocking. "I just need you to underestimate me." The Queen paused, taken aback by his boldness. Her eyes flashed with something akin to surprise, though she quickly masked it with a cold smile. "Underestimate you," she repeated, a soft laugh escaping her lips. "You've already done that yourself, human. You've already made the mistake of thinking you stand a chance against me." But Ethan didn't flinch. In that moment, he knew what he had to do. He could feel the Queen's overconfidence now. It was her greatest strength, but it was also her greatest weakness. And he was going to exploit it. Without warning, he moved. His body surged forward, faster than the Queen could react. He grabbed the nearest piece of equipment, an alien weapon that lay discarded on the floor, and swung it towards her. It wasn't a direct hit, but it was enough to throw her off balance. For the first time since they had met, the Queen stumbled back, her foot slipping on the slick surface beneath her. The soldiers around them tensed, but the Queen raised her hand, signaling them to stay back. She regained her composure quickly, but the brief moment of vulnerability did not go unnoticed. "Impressive," she said, her voice colder than before. "But it won't save you. I will not be beaten by a mere human." Ethan's heart raced, but he didn't back down. This was his moment. The Queen had underestimated him, had assumed that because he was human, he was weak. But now she was seeing a side of him she hadn't expected. "Maybe not," Ethan said, his voice low. "But I'll make sure you remember who I am." With that, he stepped forward again, not to fight, but to challenge her in a different way. This time, he was no longer just a soldier. He was a symbol of resistance, standing before the most powerful being in the galaxy. And for the first time since they had started this confrontation, the Queen's smirk faltered. Her eyes flashed with a mix of anger and intrigue. "You dare challenge me," she hissed, her voice trembling with a fury that hadn't been there before. Ethan nodded, his stance firm, his mind sharp. "Yes. I do." Hook, the Queen's confidence was shaken, but was it enough to turn the tide? Ethan had made his move, now the real game was about to begin. Would his boldness be enough to topple her, or would he fall prey to her power? The room was silent except for the rhythmic hum of alien machinery in the background. Ethan and the Queen stood facing each other, the tension between them palpable. Ethan's mind raced as he calculated his next move, trying to maintain control of the situation. He had gotten closer to the Queen than anyone ever had. He had seen her stumble, even if only for a brief moment. But now came the hardest part, exploiting that weakness. The Queen's expression was no longer one of sheer arrogance. It was still cold, still calculating, but there was something else in her eyes, a flicker of uncertainty. That moment of vulnerability had left a mark on her, and Ethan could feel it. "You're persistent," the Queen finally said, her voice smooth, almost impressed. She seemed to take a step back, reassessing him, her cold gaze never leaving his face. "I'll give you that. But your persistence will be your downfall." Ethan didn't flinch. He had already made up his mind. He wasn't going to be another casualty in her conquest. He had come this far, and there was no turning back now. He would make her regret underestimating him. With a swift motion, Ethan lunged forward. He wasn't fast enough to catch her off guard this time, but it didn't matter. The Queen's defensive shield flared to life, but there was a flaw in her technology, a brief vulnerability in the energy field around her armor. The shield flickered, just for a moment, and that was all Ethan needed. His arm shot forward, grabbing at the exposed section of her armor where the shield had failed. He could feel the cool metal beneath his fingers as he pried at it with all his strength. The Queen recoiled in surprise, but it was too late. He was already working his way through the layers of her battle armor, carefully removing the pieces one by one. The Queen's eyes flashed with fury as she attempted to regain control of the situation. Her movements were swift, like a panther on the hunt, but Ethan's determination was stronger. He had seen this moment in his mind, every movement calculated, every possible outcome played out. He knew how to fight her on her terms, how to beat her at her own game. Her voice rose in anger, no longer calm and collected. "You think you can strip me of my armor, human? You think you can weaken me by exposing what is mine?" Ethan didn't answer. His hands moved with precision, undoing the straps and clasps of the Queen's armor, piece by piece. He didn't want to fight her, he wanted to prove a point. She had always viewed humans as inferior, weak. She had assumed that her technology, her strength, would be enough to crush him. But now, she was vulnerable, and the power dynamic was shifting. The Queen's smirk faltered. For the first time, she looked uncertain. The human soldier had stripped her armor away, not just physically, but metaphorically. She was no longer the untouchable queen she had once been. She was just another warrior on the battlefield, and that realization stung. "You are not the ruler you think you are," Ethan said softly, his voice steady as he stood over her. "Without your armor, without your power, you're just like everyone else." The Queen's eyes narrowed, but there was something different about the way she looked at him now. It wasn't the dismissive gaze she had shown him earlier. It was a look of begrudging respect, mixed with the fury of someone who had been stripped of their pride. "You should have never crossed me," she whispered, a low growl in her voice. But there was no longer any mockery in her words, only a dark promise. Ethan stood tall, his chest heaving with exertion, but he didn't feel fear. He felt victory, even if it was small. He had made her question everything she thought she knew about herself. "Maybe," he replied, his voice calm. "But I'm not going to stop now." The Queen's posture shifted slightly, her defiance still strong, but now there was a subtle vulnerability beneath it. She hadn't expected this, she hadn't expected a human to see through her armor, both the literal and the figurative. She had made a mistake, and Ethan had made her pay for it. But the battle wasn't over. This was just one step. The Queen was wounded, but she wasn't defeated. She was still a powerful force, and now, more than ever, Ethan knew he had to be careful. The next move would be crucial. As the Queen straightened, her armor fully stripped away, she raised her hand. A surge of energy pulsed from her fingertips, and the ground beneath them trembled. But this time, Ethan wasn't intimidated. He had already won the first battle. Hook, the Queen had been exposed, and for the first time, she realized that the human she had so often dismissed might just be her greatest threat. Could Ethan finish what he started, or was the real danger about to begin? The atmosphere in the room had shifted dramatically. The Queen, now fully exposed, stood before Ethan, her once impenetrable armor stripped away, revealing not just her physical vulnerability but the cracks in her pride. For the first time since their encounter, there was uncertainty in her gaze. The powerful, untouchable ruler had been brought down a notch. But this was far from over. Ethan knew better than to assume that the Queen would just give up. If anything, this moment of vulnerability would only make her more dangerous. She straightened herself, her expression a mixture of fury and something Ethan hadn't expected, fear. The realization that she was not invincible had shaken her to the core. Her breath came in short bursts as she surveyed her exposed form, and for the briefest moment, Ethan could almost see the internal battle waging in her mind. But that moment passed quickly, replaced by a cold resolve. "You think you've won," the Queen finally spoke, her voice low and filled with venom. "But you've only uncovered the tip of the iceberg, human." Ethan didn't respond immediately. He was cautious now, every muscle in his body alert, anticipating what would come next. He had managed to disarm her physically, but he knew she still had tricks up her sleeve. The Queen was not a fool, and she wouldn't go down without a fight. "I've seen enough," Ethan said, his voice steady but firm. "You're not as invincible as you think." Her eyes narrowed dangerously. She raised her hand, and a sudden surge of energy crackled around her fingertips, a brilliant flash of light filling the room. The air grew dense, almost suffocating with power, as she began to summon an unseen force. The walls trembled, the floor beneath them vibrating with a low hum, as though the entire palace itself was responding to her command. But Ethan wasn't intimidated. He knew what this was, her desperation. This was her last resort, her final attempt to regain control of the situation. He had seen enough to know how she operated. Her power came from her confidence, her belief that she could crush anyone beneath her. And now that her armor was gone, her confidence was slipping. "You think you're the first to challenge me," she hissed, her voice now laced with a dangerous edge. "You think you can expose me and survive?" The energy she was wielding intensified, filling the room with an oppressive force. Ethan could feel the weight of it pressing down on him, like an invisible hand trying to crush him into the ground. But he stood his ground. He had come too far to back down now. "You're wrong," Ethan said, his voice cutting through the tension. "You've already lost. You're not the untouchable queen you think you are. You've shown your weakness." The queen's fury was palpable. Her eyes blazed with an intensity that would have made any other soldier flinch. But Ethan didn't flinch. He had seen this before, victors who couldn't handle defeat, who would fight until their last breath to maintain their dominance. But that was where the queen had made her mistake. She underestimated him. She thought she could break him with her power, but she hadn't accounted for his resilience. "You don't understand," the queen growled, her voice rising in anger. "I am the ruler of this empire. I do not bend, and I do not break." Ethan's heart raced, but he didn't show fear. He could feel the air growing heavier, the weight of her power pushing him down. He needed to act fast. He took a deep breath, focusing all his energy on what he had to do next. He had no choice but to push through the queen's assault. With a burst of speed, Ethan dove toward the queen, closing the distance between them before she could unleash another blast of energy. Her eyes widened in surprise, but there was no time for hesitation. Ethan reached out, grabbing hold of the queen's wrist, where the crackling energy was emanating from. He twisted her arm, forcing her to release her grip on the power that had been building. The queen staggered back, a sharp gasp escaping her lips. For a moment, she was stunned, off balance, her power disrupted. Ethan took advantage of the opening, driving his fist into her midsection. It wasn't enough to bring her down, but it was enough to shift the momentum of the fight. "You're not a queen anymore," Ethan said, his voice steady but filled with conviction. "You're just another person, vulnerable, like the rest of us." The queen's breath came in shallow gasps as she staggered, a flicker of disbelief in her eyes. For the first time, her arrogant demeanor wavered. She wasn't the unbreakable force she had once been. She was, for the first time, facing her own mortality. And Ethan knew that she was realizing it. "You've done it now," the queen spat, her voice strained. "You've made a fatal mistake. You've proven yourself to be a worthy opponent, but now you will pay the price." But Ethan wasn't afraid. The battle wasn't over, but the power had shifted. The queen, despite her fury, was no longer the untouchable force she had once been. She was vulnerable, and he had done the impossible. He had made her question her invincibility. Hook, the queen's power was slipping, and Ethan could feel it. He had taken control of the battle, but was he ready for what was coming next? The queen had one final move, and Ethan had to be ready. Would this be the end of her reign, or was there more to her than he had yet discovered? The battle had raged long enough. The once proud alien queen, stripped of her armor and her overbearing confidence, now stood face to face with Ethan, breathing heavily, her anger barely contained. Her grip on her remaining power was slipping, and the room around them seemed to hum with anticipation, as if the very walls recognized that a reckoning was near. Ethan knew this was the moment. This was the culmination of everything he had worked toward, the chance to finally defeat the queen and stop her reign of terror. But deep down, he also knew the hardest part was yet to come. The queen was down, but she was not out. The final test wasn't just about physical strength or power, it was about the will to break free from the oppressive forces that had dominated her world for so long. The queen looked at him with a mixture of hate and reluctant admiration. Her breathing was ragged, but her defiance remained as strong as ever. "You think you've won, human," she spat, her voice dripping with venom. "You're no different than any other conqueror. You think you can take what's mine without consequences. You'll regret this." Ethan took a slow step forward, keeping his eyes locked onto hers. "I'm not here to conquer. I'm here to stop this war. You've caused enough destruction." It's time to end this. Her eyes narrowed, and for the briefest moment, Ethan saw a flicker of something else in her expression, a kind of vulnerability that she had fought so hard to hide. But before he could process it fully, the Queen's fury flared again. She raised her hands, and for a moment, the air around them crackled with energy. "You don't understand," she growled. "I am more than just a ruler. I am the last of my kind, the only one who can save my people from extinction. Everything I've done for them. And now you are trying to take it all away. You have no idea what you've unleashed." Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. He had known this was about more than just power or pride, but hearing the Queen's words made him question everything. Was she truly a villain, or was she simply another ruler trapped by her own sense of duty and desperation? Could he defeat her and end the war, or was there something he was missing, something that could change everything? He hesitated, but just for a moment. His mission was clear, the Queen had to be stopped. He could not afford to be swayed by her words. "You've lost control of your empire, Queen," Ethan said, his voice firm and steady. "Your people are not the ones you've been protecting. You've been protecting your own ego. And it's time for that to end." At that moment, the Queen unleashed her full power. A surge of energy exploded from her fingertips, shooting out like a deadly beam of light, aimed directly at Ethan. The force was enough to shatter the air itself, but Ethan was ready. He dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the blast as it tore through the ground, leaving a scar of molten rock in its wake. Ethan's pulse quickened. This wasn't just a fight for survival anymore, it was a fight for everything. The Queen wasn't just an enemy, she was a symbol of everything that had been wrong with her empire. Every blow, every challenge she had thrown at him had only served to sharpen his resolve. He reached for the weapon at his side, a piece of technology he had picked up earlier, a small, advanced disruptor device capable of interfering with the Queen's energy shield. It wasn't much, but it might be enough to tip the scales in his favor. He activated it, and a faint hum filled the air as the device began to glow. The Queen saw it too, and her expression changed. For the first time, there was a hint of fear in her eyes. "What is that?" she demanded, her voice cracking slightly. Ethan didn't answer. He aimed the disruptor at her energy field, releasing a pulse of energy directly at her. The Queen's shield flared, crackling with power, but it wasn't enough. The disruptor's pulse hit the shield, and with a deafening crack, it faltered. The Queen's eyes widened in shock as her energy shield began to fail, her once invincible armor rendered useless. She tried to summon more power, but the energy she had been relying on was no longer under her control. The room grew silent, the hum of the disruptor the only sound as the Queen stood there, broken and vulnerable for the first time. Ethan took a step forward, his hand still clenched around the disruptor. "It's over," he said, his voice unwavering. "You can't win this fight. Your empire is finished." The Queen's lips trembled as she stared at him, her anger and defiance still burning brightly. But there was something else in her eyes now, a deep sadness. For all her power, her armor, and her weapons, she had never anticipated this moment. "Why?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "Why did you come here? Why not just let us be? We've done nothing but fight for survival." Ethan hesitated. The question weighed on him. He could feel the weight of her pain, the years of struggle and sacrifice that had led her to this point. But there was no turning back. The destruction her empire had caused could not be undone. The war had to end. Because, he said softly, no one should be allowed to rule through fear. Not you. Not anyone. And with that, the room went silent once more. The Queen, once all-powerful, stood before him, defeated, exposed, and vulnerable. Ethan had won, but the cost of this victory still loomed large. The Queen had been broken, her empire crumbling before her eyes. But was this truly the end, or had Ethan only uncovered the first layer of a much deeper conflict? What would the future hold now that the true battle had been fought and won? The silence was deafening. The Queen stood before Ethan, her once mighty form now broken. The power that had once flowed so freely from her was now depleted, her aura of invincibility shattered. Her army, once so loyal and fierce, now lay in the shadows, watching her downfall with a mixture of disbelief and awe. It was over. The empire she had built, the reign she had ruled with an iron fist, had crumbled. And yet, despite her defeat, something lingered in the air, an unsettling sense of unfinished business. Ethan felt it, too. As he looked at the Queen, he realized that this wasn't just a victory over a ruthless ruler. It was the beginning of something much larger, a change that would ripple across the galaxy, shifting the balance of power in ways they couldn't yet comprehend. Her fall had come with a price, one that neither of them fully understood. "You think you've won, human?" The Queen's voice, though weakened, still carried the same bitterness. There was no resignation in her tone, only defiance, as if she were still clinging to some shred of her former strength. "You've taken my throne, stripped me of my armor, and exposed my weakness. But you haven't won anything. The real battle, it's just beginning." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. There was something in her eyes, something that felt less like the desperation of a defeated ruler and more like the knowledge of something he hadn't considered. For the first time, doubt crept into his mind. Could this really be the end? Was the Queen's downfall just the beginning of an even darker chapter? "What are you talking about?" Ethan asked, his voice steady but laced with curiosity. "Your reign is over. Your empire is falling apart. It's done." The Queen took a slow, deliberate step forward, her gaze never leaving his. "You don't understand. You never understood the true nature of my empire, my people. You think you've defeated me because you've taken my crown. But my legacy isn't in that throne, it's in the very foundation of the empire I built. I am the last of my kind, the last who can control the power that fuels our civilization. Without me, everything falls apart. You may have defeated me, but you've unwittingly unleashed something far more dangerous than you realize." Ethan's pulse quickened. He had thought this was just about ending the Queen's reign, about stopping her war and saving his people. But now he realized how little he truly knew about the stakes at play. The Queen wasn't just a ruler, she was the keystone holding the fragile piece of her empire together. And now that she was gone, what would take its place? "You're saying, without you, your empire will collapse?" Ethan asked, struggling to grasp the magnitude of what she was implying. The Queen nodded, her eyes darkening with a cold intensity. "Yes. And you, by defeating me, have triggered the collapse. You've set in motion a chain of events that will consume not only my empire but everything we fought for. The wars we waged, the alliances we forged, the technology we controlled, it was all held together by my will. With me gone, there is nothing to stop the chaos from spreading. You may have won the battle, but the war, Ethan, has only just begun." Ethan took a step back, his mind racing. He had come here to stop the Queen, to save Earth and the other planets under her rule, but now he realized how much he had underestimated the complexity of the situation. Her empire wasn't just a dictatorship, it was a fragile ecosystem, held together by one ruler's iron grip. And now that grip had been broken, the consequences of that action were far from clear. The Queen's expression softened slightly, her gaze lingering on him with a strange mix of regret and something else, perhaps respect. "You didn't choose this, human. But your victory over me will have consequences. There will be those who see you as the hero, the one who brought me down. And there will be those who see you as a threat, the one who shattered the balance. And they will come for you." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. The Queen's words weren't empty threats, they were a warning, a glimpse of the storm that was coming. The collapse of her empire wasn't the end of the war, it was the beginning of something far worse. And he was at the center of it. "You think I care about being a hero?" Ethan said, his voice firm. "I didn't come here to save the galaxy. I came here to stop you. But now that I'm in this, I'll fight to the end. You can't control me. You can't control what's coming." The Queen's lips curled into a faint smile, though there was no warmth in it. "No, I can't control you. But you can't stop what's already been set in motion. Your victory over me has created a power vacuum, one that will be filled by those who will stop at nothing to seize control. And they won't be kind to you. Or anyone. Ethan stood still, absorbing the weight of her words. The room felt colder now, the reality of what he had done settling in like a heavy stone in his chest. He had broken the chains that bound the Queen to her empire, but in doing so, he had unleashed something far more dangerous, a force that would tear the galaxy apart. As the Queen took a final, lingering look at him, her shoulders slumped slightly, as though the weight of her actions was finally catching up to her. She had fought for survival, for her people, but in the end, it was all for nothing. And Ethan realized, with a sharp pang of regret, that this was the price of his victory. The true cost had yet to be paid. Hook, the Queen had warned him, and the weight of her words lingered in the air. Ethan had defeated the Queen, but in doing so, he had opened the door to an even greater war. The true battle was only beginning. Would Ethan rise to the challenge, or would the consequences of his actions destroy everything he fought for?